Hi, welcome to TeachStar, and in today's video we are looking at marking and how to keep on top of marking. And marking is forever the bane or the bane of teaching for some people, but for others actually it's a really positive experience and something that actually some people really like. So it is polarizing, I suppose. I've met plenty of people who despise marking, but marking does give us an opportunity to actually understand where each individual student is at with their work and to see whether they've actually understood what it is that we're teaching them. And it's a real good opportunity to sort of evaluate your own lessons and evaluate kind of who's working and who's not, and can actually lead to a massive change in how you approach your lessons down the line. But one of the issues with marking is that in my career I've had, say, 150 different students across all my groups, and that's quite a lot of books to mark. And I know that some teachers, I don't know how, but some teachers mark all their books every week. And especially in primary school, I've noticed that all the people I know in primary school mark their books so frequently. I know that they generally have one group, but they have different subjects and they absolutely make sure they mark the books. And it seems to be normally when I'm looking for people to bring in to talk to teams and stuff, it's definitely from primary schools, because they just have a routine and they just do it and it's just expected. In secondary schools it's a little bit more loose in some schools, and policies are trying to protect the teachers from burning out, from doing too much, from feeling too much pressure, which is really good. But policies normally are quite vague when it comes to marking. And I think there's a trend at the moment to tighten that up and to make sure that marking is seen as more important, and to ensure that marking is done and through work scrutinies and book scrutinies and stuff like that. But as a teacher, how do you keep on top of marking? Now, probably the worst way for an average teacher is to just get the stack of 30 books at the end of each day and just mark, and then get the next stack of 30 books, mark. For me, I find that really difficult to do, because it takes so long, and like just the process itself is very boring and mundane. And I always try and find different ways of doing things that I don't find that interesting, because teaching I find absolutely amazing. I love teaching, but marking, I need to do a bit of work on it. And this video is about what kind of ideas there are out there for maybe you to change the way you do marking to find it a bit more engaging. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is just keeping organised. Have a day a week for each of your sets, or have a day each fortnight for each of your classes, and just keep to it. Keep a regular kind of routine way of doing it, and that's really helped me to have in my planner kind of what days I'm marking each book, each set of books, and I never do more than 30 in one day, because I think 30 is my kind of maximum that I can bear in one day. But if I'm doing a different 30 each day, actually the books, the turnover of marking is normally a fortnight, kind of 2 weeks with the groups I've got. So they're regularly getting marked, and I'm regularly looking at what the students know. And the students love their books being marked. They absolutely love it. Even the ones that don't seem to respond to your comments or don't seem to read what you've written, the fact you've marked them is enough for most students. And I think I'll do a video later on about like the importance of marking, because I think it is very important. One strategy that a teacher shared with me, which I thought was amazing, was not doing a set of 30 books and instead doing a set of 5 books for each class each day, which I thought was a really good idea. It needs a little bit more organising, because obviously you've got to keep track of which books to take, but what they had is a list, and they had different groups for their class register, and said, right, these 5 students, can you put your books open on my desk ready to go? And so they, at the end of the day, they had a big stack of each of the 5 books from each of their groups, and they just marked them at the end of the day. I thought that was a very, very good idea. They also sometimes changed up the list, and sometimes they were a bit concerned about a student, so they'd kind of move them up the order, and it gave them a bit of flexibility of making sure that they were looking at maybe specific books. And I think with that you can also add kind of people to the 5 if there's someone in particular you want to just keep an eye on. And a strategy to make marking quicker is have an idea of a set of things that you're going to say, kind of a comment bank of things that you're going to say. And some markers like writing in another question for the students to answer, so you have a kind of conversation in the books. If you have a list of kind of 3 different questions that you're going to write in their books, then that can just speed it up because you've got them in front of you. You don't have to sit and think and try and come up with something for each book. I think that's really helpful. And you know, even though you've got the 3 questions, there's always a student who has completely not understood it and would not understand those 3 questions, so you can think up a different question for that, or a different comment for that student. Or someone's done really, really well, understood everything, so you might want to think up a harder question than the ones you've got available. But try and keep things routine, try and keep things in a structure as much as possible. And I think when I started teaching, they just gave me a red pen and said, "Right, mark," and I'm just like, well, what am I marking? And the question is also like, do you mark all of their work? Do you go through and tick and cross everything that they've done in their book? And like that, to me, that's just not practical. There's just not enough time to do that for each student, for each lesson. But it's finding a balance, because what I want to do, I always get them to mark their own work or peer mark their work, and then I look through it and I just look at it and see, is that a quality piece? Has that been marked properly? And I overrule it occasionally, but generally speaking, you know, if they've been trained well in how to mark and kind of what is the right answer, then actually they kind of become self-regulating, and I'm just someone there checking to see whether the process is working well. I think peer and self-assessment is so important, because it's not only cutting down your marking, but it's also getting them to think more like a marker. And when you're thinking like a marker, you then become a better student. So yeah, it's win-win. And yeah, I think WWWEBIs work really well. If you haven't heard that, WWW is what went well, writing down a comment that's positive, something that the student did really well. And EBI is even better if. So constructive criticism, some next step for the student to go to. I think it's really important to be positive where you can. Like, I've marked books that have had very, very little work in, unfortunately, but there's always something to say that's positive. I mean, I've marked books before that are almost blank and there's nothing on the page to say that's positive, but actually the student, you know, came in really well, or you know, whatever. There's always something to say that's positive. And sometimes I write a comment, you know, right, this is what we need to do next, or next lesson I'll come and sit with you and talk about this. I also have before kind of held students' books back and talked to them outside before a lesson and said, look, you know, I've looked through your book, I want this to be a kind of 180 turn now, because this book's not good enough. And I'm going to talk to you now before the lesson starts, so that we don't start the lesson off on a bad note. So I'm talking to you before the lesson, but when you go in that, I want to see some really good work from you. And often students respond to that really, really well, instead of going up to them in the lesson and start saying, this is a rubbish book, blah, 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 because then that starts that lesson off really, really badly. And my policy is always, every lesson is fresh. Whatever the student's done, within reason, whatever the student's done, every lesson they come in, it's completely fresh. All is forgiven, and we start from zero. So it's really, really difficult to say really horrible things in their book, and then they open their book, and then that's their next lesson. They're not going to work. So it's important to be positive. But I hope you've found some ideas of how to make marking a bit more bearable. I'm sorry if this was a bit rambly, but this is a kind of topic, there's loads and loads of ideas out there, and I think I've skimmed the surface. But if you've got your own ideas, please write them in the comments below, and then I'll share them with the community. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you want to see more from us, please click subscribe. We release videos every single weekday at 5 o'clock in the evening. Thank you.